Bonjour, good morning. My name is Lauren Burnhill, and I'm the Managing Director of One Planet Ventures, a consultancy I formed in 2009 to help companies and financial firms develop a meaningful and practical approach to ESG impact and responsible investment. The fact of the matter is today regulators are increasingly framing ESG, environmental, social, and governance, as a fiduciary responsibility. Now, ESG was first developed as a niche equity strategy about 10 years ago, and it was meant to incorporate a discerning view of environmental, social, and governance practices into investment decision-making. It was viewed as niche because classical economists say that environmental and social impacts of investment are externalities. And increasingly, we have come to realize that that's just not true. A negative externality that we fail to take into account can turn into a tremendous financial liability. And at the same token, a positive externality that we have not made explicit is a missed opportunity to build trust and brand reputation. And in fact, increasing climate risks have upped the urgency of this discussion and really intensified the issue of performance risk as a result of climate change. The bad news is that there are as many interpretations of ESG as there are days in the year. That means it's virtually impossible for regulators to develop meaningful and practical guidance around the term ESG. I think what they really mean is we all need to practice responsible investment. There's no doubt that environmental and social impact management is part of your fiduciary duty, regardless of the regulatory regime you operate under. And that's because if your beneficiaries, if your members see their livelihoods, their homes, their well-being destroyed by climate-related risks, the fact that you're generating a positive financial return really becomes a little bit irrelevant. Climate risk impacts all sectors of the economy: agriculture, industry, technology, education, transportation, workforce productivity, affordable housing, and distribution. The infamous last mile of every supply chain is dependent on all kinds of infrastructure and transportation. The good news, though, you don't need to figure out ESG to practice responsible investment. Risk analysis really just needs to reflect logical questions about environmental and social factors that can impact financial performance. What could disrupt business operations? Floods, droughts, raw materials shortages. Think about the quantity of rare minerals and metals in your cell phone. Consumer boycotts. We can't predict the black swans that might disrupt business operations, but most environmental and social risks are part of long-term trends that we can see and appreciate today, even if there is significant uncertainty as to how they will play out in the long run. Where there's risk, there's opportunity. An increasing body of research, both equities and fixed income, shows that companies who manage their own ESG risk and therefore have higher scores on a variety of ESG benchmarks and indices tend to outperform competitors who focus only on short-term financial results. Not surprisingly, one of the reasons for this is that companies that have this risk management awareness around environmental and social factors tend to be better managed with longer-term visions of what would make for a successful company in a changing economic and climate environment. Companies don't have to solve all of the problems or risks that they identify. In fact, they can't. We don't have solutions for everything, and we don't know the extent to which some of these dramatic changes are going to play out in the future. What they do know and need to do, and what you need to do, is to ask relevant questions now and on an ongoing periodic basis pretty much forever. Increasing data collection and improved analytics means that we're getting better answers to the questions we have. We're able to answer more of the questions that we can identify at this stage. And that means that we're looking at better outcomes, even in the face of increased risk. We can create alpha from environmental and social risk. One of the things we need to do is change investment structures and the incentives around the issuance of those debt and equity instruments. Longer-term financing can reduce performance and default risks, as well as provide better asset and liability matching, particularly for pension funds. And that's especially true in infrastructure, where financing longer-lived assets with short and medium-term money really makes no sense, and in fact can increase default risk unnecessarily. But we need to recognize that investment bankers make their money on fee income, usually upfront fee income. So they have a disincentive to structure longer-term investments. We need to think about pay-for-performance type features that can incorporate periodic evaluations, benchmark targets, potential incentive payments that could overcome those disincentives and encourage financial sector actors to design instruments that really meet the needs of the underlying assets and the asset owners. Immediate disinvestment of the risk that you find and the things that you don't feel belong in your portfolio isn't the only way to practice sustainable and responsible investment. In fact, a gradual, measured approach may be the more prudent way to go, particularly if you're combining that by engaging in a dialogue with the companies in your portfolio that you're thinking you would like to divest. An example of that is Shell is a fossil fuel company, and yet Moody's in its most recent credit review pointed out that the company's risk management and investment in renewable energy actually makes them a better credit risk than many of their peers. And they did, in fact, once again receive an investment grade rating. A gradual, thoughtful rebalancing of your portfolio can have immediate trust and reputation benefits, particularly if you communicate what you're doing, not just with your shareholders, but with a broader group of stakeholders, and you regularly provide information as to what you have been doing and how that changes over time as new data and information becomes available. Refining due diligence and credit policies to take these factors into account and to favor companies that have a proactive approach to their own environmental and social risk can improve both your short-term and long-term financial returns. There are a lot of new opportunities coming up in addition to rethinking your current portfolio. Civic tech, companies that are making government data available for private use, kinds of analytics we need. Transparency technology, applications of blockchain, ZKP, zero knowledge proof that provide for data privacy but true verification of parties in a transaction. Data technology, artificial intelligence, deep machine learning, all of those are new investment opportunities emerging as a result of this changing climate and economic environment. The bottom line, risk needs to be identified, analyzed, and managed through ongoing processes and practices. That's sometimes referred to as ESG integration. You could call it responsible investment integration. It's really about knowing what you have now, what you would like to do, and changing your internal policies and practices so that you can do that in a meaningful way without incurring necessarily lots of additional expense or having any kind of negative impact on your operations. The flip side of risk is absolutely opportunity. When we look at the potential problems that can arise from climate risk, we also need to see that means there are opportunities to make better investment decisions where climate risk is being managed appropriately. Regular communication with shareholders and stakeholders, transparency, if you will, increases engagement even when that risk is present. I think most organizations and individuals are aware that we don't yet have all of the solutions to climate change and extreme weather. What they want to know is that we're aware of what's going on and that we're doing something to respond in a way that is adaptive and resilient, not just trying to go back to what used to be in a world that no longer exists. The time to act is now. Regulators are increasingly taking action, but they can lack the resources to really identify the best actions that could be taken. Companies and investors who develop policies and practices now can look to and maybe even expect to have their systems grandfathered in as regulation emerges, and that can avoid some potentially disruptive impacts of whatever happens on the with untested legislation that is being put into place. I realize this is quite a broad body of information that I've condensed into about 10 minutes. I would be happy to speak with you and or your organizations about any of these topics and any specific issues within these topics. at any point. You can find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. I would be happy to talk further. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a great day. Bye-bye.